Most people remember that night because of what happened in the ballroom. The crystal chandeliers, the applause, the music stopping, the glass of red wine splashing across my face. What they never saw was everything happening behind the ballroom doors at exactly the same time. Behind the kitchen doors, someone was quietly removing my retirement gifts. Backstage, a microphone technician was being told to skip half of my farewell speech. In the service hallway, a lawyer stood holding an envelope he had been ordered not to deliver until I left the hotel. 3 different places. 3 different conversations. One carefully planned humiliation. I didn't know any of it while I stood smiling for photographs. I only learned the truth later. By then, my family had already destroyed 42 years of my career in less than 5 minutes. My name is Harold Whitmore. I was 68 years old when I retired as superintendent of the largest public school district in our county. 42 years. Thousands of students, hundreds of teachers, dozens of schools. I'd attended countless graduations, award ceremonies, and retirement dinners for other people. I never imagined my own retirement gala would become the most painful night of my life. The ballroom was beautiful. Round tables covered in white linen, fresh flowers, soft piano music, a stage with a large screen showing photographs from my career. Children I'd once taught, teachers I'd mentored, buildings we'd opened together. Every picture reminded me how quickly a lifetime passes. Guests smiled as they entered. Former coworkers shook my hand. Parents introduced me to children who were now adults. One father hugged me. "You believed in my son when nobody else did." I smiled. "Your son did the hard part." Moments like that reminded me why I'd stayed in education instead of chasing a higher salary somewhere else. My son, Brian, arrived nearly 30 minutes late. He wasn't alone. His wife, Vanessa, walked beside him wearing an elegant emerald green evening gown and carrying herself as though she were the guest of honor. Brian hugged me quickly. "Sorry, we're late. Traffic." I glanced toward the nearly empty parking lot outside the ballroom windows. There wasn't much traffic. He forced a laugh. "You know how Fridays are." Before I could answer, Vanessa interrupted. "Where are we sitting?" Not, "Congratulations." Not, "You look wonderful." Just, "Where are we sitting?" I pointed toward the family table closest to the stage. She looked disappointed. "I thought we'd be at the head table." I smiled politely. "The head table is reserved for school board members and retired principals." Her expression hardened for only a second. Most people would have missed it. I didn't. Across the ballroom, the catering manager quietly pulled 2 waiters aside. I didn't hear their conversation. I only noticed one waiter looking toward me before nodding nervously. Then they disappeared through the kitchen doors. At the time, it meant nothing. Later, I'd learn exactly what they had been told. Meanwhile, behind the stage curtains, my longtime executive assistant, Linda Morales, was arranging the note cards for my farewell speech. She'd spent weeks helping me write it. Not because I enjoyed talking about myself, because I wanted to thank everyone who'd helped me reach retirement. Teachers, custodians, bus drivers, secretaries, people whose names rarely appeared in newspapers. Linda carefully placed the note cards on the podium. Then someone entered backstage. "Brian." She smiled. "I didn't know family was allowed back here." Brian returned the smile. "I'm just helping Dad." Linda stepped aside. She had no reason not to trust him. Across the hotel, on the 2nd floor, Attorney Daniel Pierce stepped out of the elevator carrying a slim leather folder. He checked his watch. 6:42. Perfect timing. Inside that folder were documents I'd signed 3 days earlier. Documents no one in my family knew existed. Daniel walked toward the ballroom entrance. Before he could open the doors, someone stopped him. "Hotel event coordinator." "I'm sorry, sir. The family asked that all business matters wait until after the celebration." Daniel frowned. "I was specifically asked to deliver this tonight. I'm only following instructions." After a moment, he quietly stepped back into the hallway. The envelope remained unopened beneath his arm. Inside the ballroom, dinner was served. Laughter filled the room. People raised glasses. Stories echoed from table to table. For a little while, everything felt exactly the way I'd hoped, until I noticed something strange. Every time someone congratulated me, Vanessa rolled her eyes. Every compliment seemed to irritate her. One retired principal stood and said, "Harold spent 42 years making sure every child mattered." The room applauded. Vanessa leaned toward Brian. She whispered something. He laughed. Neither of them realized I had seen it. Then came another moment that felt oddly out of place. Linda hurried to my table looking confused. "Harold, have you already taken your speech?" I looked at her. "No, it isn't backstage anymore. I left it on the podium." She searched behind the curtains, under chairs, beside the sound equipment, nothing. My speech had disappeared. I smiled to reassure her. "It's all right. I'll speak from the heart." She nodded, but something about her expression told me she didn't believe the note cards had simply gone missing. Just before dessert, the master of ceremonies walked onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce a man who devoted more than 4 decades to serving this community." The ballroom erupted into applause. I stood, straightened my jacket, and started walking toward the stage. I had no idea that behind 3 different doors, 3 completely different plans were already in motion. As I walked toward the stage, the audience saw an honored retiree smiling. What they didn't see was everything happening behind the ballroom doors at that exact moment. Behind the stage, Linda was still searching for my speech. She opened every folder, checked beneath every chair, even looked inside empty equipment cases. "It has to be here." She whispered it more to herself than anyone else. Then she noticed something. One of the backstage security cameras had been turned away from the podium, not unplugged, simply rotated, just enough so it couldn't record anyone approaching my note cards. Linda frowned. That camera had been facing the stage all afternoon. Someone had deliberately moved it. Inside the kitchen, the executive chef stopped plating desserts. "Where's table 1? A young waiter looked confused. "They cancelled it." "What do you mean cancelled?" "The gentleman said the guest of honor won't be staying long." The chef frowned. "Who said that?" "The son." The chef slowly lowered the dessert plate. "Nobody cancelled dessert at a retirement gala, especially not for the guest of honor." Meanwhile, attorney Daniel Pierce remained outside the ballroom holding the leather folder. He checked his phone. No missed calls, no messages, only one instruction I'd given him 3 days earlier. "Hand it to me personally before I leave. Simple. Private. Important." He decided to wait. That decision would change everything. Back inside, the master of ceremonies smiled. "Please welcome a man whose integrity shaped generations." The applause grew louder. I stepped onto the stage. Looking across the room, I felt grateful. Teachers stood clapping. Former students smiled. Even several school board members looked emotional. For one brief moment, I believed this was exactly how retirement should feel. Then I noticed Brian. He wasn't clapping. He was watching the ballroom entrance, almost as though he were waiting for something, or someone. The master of ceremonies handed me the microphone. "Harold, the floor is yours." I smiled. "Thank you." I reached for my speech, then remembered. The note cards were gone. A few guests chuckled when I laughed softly. It appears my speech decided to retire before I did. The room laughed with me. I relaxed. Maybe speaking from the heart was better anyway. I've spent 42 years believing. Before I could finish, Vanessa suddenly stood, her wine glass still half full. She smiled politely. "Excuse me, I'd like to say something first." The audience assumed it had been planned. So did I. I stepped aside. "Of course." She walked slowly toward the stage. Elegant, confident, perfectly composed. She accepted another microphone, then looked directly at me. "I've listened to people call Harold an inspiration all evening." She paused. "But I think everyone deserves the whole story." The room became quiet. I frowned. "What story?" She ignored me. "You all see a respected educator. I see a selfish old man." Several guests exchanged confused looks. Brian remained seated, expressionless. Behind the ballroom, Linda hurried toward the sound booth. She'd finally realized something. The microphone backstage had disappeared too. Only one wireless microphone remained active. The one Vanessa now held. Vanessa continued speaking. "Do you know what Harold loves more than family?" She smiled. "Himself." Nobody laughed, nobody applauded. People simply stared. I quietly said, "Vanessa, this isn't the time." She turned toward me. "Or, I think it's exactly the right time." Brian slowly stood, then walked beside his wife. Instead of stopping her, he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, supporting every word. In the service hallway, attorney Daniel Pierce heard the applause stop. Then he heard Vanessa's voice echoing through the ballroom. He couldn't make out every word, only enough to realize something had gone terribly wrong. He took one step toward the entrance. The same event coordinator blocked him again. "Please, sir." Daniel looked past him. "No, I believe now is exactly the right time." Inside the ballroom, Vanessa lifted her wine glass. "You know why Harold never retired earlier?" She answered her own question. Because he couldn't stand living in a world where he wasn't the most important person? My coworkers looked stunned. Several people glanced toward me, waiting for me to defend myself. I didn't, not because her words were true, because I couldn't understand why this was happening. Then Brian finally spoke, his first words of the evening directed at me. "You've embarrassed this family long enough." I stared at my own son. "What are you talking about?" He shook his head. "You always needed attention, even tonight." The room became painfully silent. Vanessa smiled. Then, without the slightest hesitation, she threw the entire glass of red wine directly into my face. The cold liquid hit my eyes, my suit, my white dress shirt. The front row gasped. Several women stood in shock. Nobody moved. Red wine dripped slowly from my chin onto the stage floor. I wiped my eyes, looked at my son, waiting, praying, for him to tell his wife she'd gone too far. Instead, he looked directly at me, sneered, and said loud enough for every guest in that ballroom to hear, "You old embarrassment." Not one person clapped, not one person spoke. The entire ballroom sat frozen. Then, from somewhere behind the closed ballroom doors, a loud voice echoed through the silence. "Mr. Whitmore, I have legal documents that everyone in this room needs to see." Every head turned toward the entrance. The ballroom doors opened. Every conversation stopped. Attorney Daniel Pierce walked inside carrying the same brown leather folder he'd been trying to deliver for nearly half an hour. His polished shoes echoed across the silent ballroom. He didn't look at me first. He looked directly at Brian, then at Vanessa. Finally, he walked onto the stage. "I'm sorry for interrupting, but Mr. Whitmore instructed me that if I was ever prevented from delivering these documents privately, I was to deliver them publicly." Brian's face changed. "What documents?" Daniel calmly answered. "The ones you were hoping he'd never receive tonight." Vanessa laughed. "This isn't the time for legal paperwork." Daniel didn't even acknowledge her. Instead, he turned toward the master of ceremonies. "May I borrow the projector?" The room remained completely silent. The master of ceremonies looked at the school board president. She slowly nodded. "Go ahead." Behind the stage, Linda finally reached the security office. The technician was replaying footage from earlier that evening. She immediately noticed something. At 5:41 p.m. Brian entered backstage alone. He looked around, removed Harold's speech from the podium, placed it inside his jacket. Then, he quietly rotated the security camera away. Linda stared at the screen. "Oh, goodness." She immediately copied the footage onto a flash drive, then hurried back toward the ballroom. Meanwhile, Daniel connected his laptop to the projector. The giant screen behind the stage came alive. The first image appeared, not a legal contract, a photograph. Me standing beside 42 different scholarship recipients over the years, then another. Teachers, students, community volunteers, families. Daniel spoke quietly. "Mr. Whitmore asked me to begin here." He pressed the remote again. The screen changed. A financial statement appeared. Large numbers filled the ballroom. "This is Mr. Whitmore's retirement account." Several guests looked confused. Daniel continued. "Earlier this week, Mr. Whitmore instructed our office to establish a permanent educational foundation." Whispers spread through the audience. "What foundation?" Daniel answered before anyone asked aloud. "The Harold Whitmore Student Opportunity Foundation." He opened another document. Every dollar in his retirement savings, every investment, and every bonus he accumulated over 42 years was donated. The whispers became louder. "No family inheritance. Nothing." Daniel nodded. "Correct. The funds will provide college scholarships for children whose families cannot afford higher education." Brian suddenly stepped forward. "You can't do that." Daniel looked at him calmly. "He already did. The documents were signed 3 days ago." Vanessa folded her arms. "You're lying." Daniel removed another paper from the folder. "These are certified copies." He placed them on the podium, filed with the court 48 hours ago. Brian grabbed the papers, his hands shook. This wasn't supposed to happen." Without thinking, he'd said the quiet part out loud. Half the ballroom heard him. Just then, Linda rushed onto the stage carrying the flash drive. "Wait, everyone needs to see something else." She handed it to the sound technician. A moment later, the projector switched from legal documents to security footage. The timestamp appeared 5:41 p.m. The audience watched Brian walk backstage. He looked around, removed my speech, turned the security camera, then quietly walked away. Nobody said a word. Linda pressed another button. A second camera appeared. This one overlooked the service hallway. Vanessa stood there speaking to a waiter. Guests watched her hand him several folded bills. Audio wasn't available, but the waiter nodded, then carried away the dessert prepared for my table. Another clip. Brian speaking with the hotel coordinator. Another, Vanessa pointing toward the ballroom entrance where Daniel had been waiting. Another, the event coordinator blocking Daniel from entering. The entire evening unfolded before everyone's eyes. Not through accusations, through actions. The school board president slowly stood. She walked onto the stage beside me, then faced the audience. I've worked with Harold Whitmore for 27 years. She looked toward Brian. Tonight I wondered if I'd somehow misunderstood the man I respected. She paused. I didn't. I misunderstood his family. Brian looked around the ballroom. No one was standing beside him anymore. Not his co-workers, not his friends, not even the relatives who had come to celebrate. People quietly moved their chairs away from his table. One family left entirely. Vanessa whispered, "Say something." Brian opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I finally stepped back to the microphone. Wine still stained my jacket, my face, my shirt. I could have yelled. I could have demanded an apology. Instead, I smiled. Not because I wasn't hurt, because I suddenly realized something. Nothing either of them had done could erase 42 years of honest work. No glass of wine was powerful enough to stain a lifetime. I looked around the ballroom, then quietly said, "I think I'll give the speech I came here to give." The audience slowly rose to their feet. This time, the standing ovation wasn't planned. It happened because every person in that room chose it. Brian and Vanessa remained seated, the only two people not applauding. As I unfolded the copy of my speech Daniel quietly handed me, a sheriff's deputy entered through the ballroom doors. He wasn't looking for me. He was looking for my son. The sheriff's deputy walked calmly toward the stage. No flashing lights, no raised voice, just quiet determination. The ballroom remained standing. Hundreds of people watched without making a sound. The deputy stopped beside Brian. "Mr. Whitmore." Brian looked relieved. "You mean my father?" The deputy shook his head. "No, I mean you." His expression changed instantly. "We've received a formal complaint involving theft of legal documents, obstruction of a legal representative, and attempted financial coercion." Brian laughed nervously. "This is a misunderstanding." The deputy didn't argue. He simply looked toward Daniel. "Mr. Pierce." Daniel nodded. "I've already submitted sworn statements." Linda stepped forward next. "So have I." The hotel manager joined them. "And so have we." One by one, people Brian thought would stay silent quietly stepped forward. The event coordinator admitted Brian had instructed him not to allow Daniel into the ballroom. The waiter admitted Vanessa had slipped him money to remove the guest of honor dessert and delay service at my table. The audiovisual technician confirmed someone had rotated the backstage security camera before the ceremony. None of them had realized they were helping humiliate me. Now they wanted the truth known. Brian looked around the ballroom. No one came to his defense. Not one person. He turned toward Vanessa. "Say something." She took a slow step backward, then another. "I only did what you asked." Brian stared at her. "What?" "You said embarrassing him publicly would finally make him give us what we wanted." The room erupted into whispers. Brian's face turned pale. "You weren't supposed to say that." Vanessa folded her arms. "I'm not taking the blame alone." For the first time that evening, their perfect partnership collapsed. Each began blaming the other. Neither realized they were proving everyone's worst suspicions. The school board president quietly approached me. "Harold, would you still like to give your retirement speech?" I looked down at the wine stains covering my jacket, then smiled. "I think I'll keep them." She looked confused. "The stains?" I nodded. "They'll remind me who applauded because they respected me, and who only stood beside me when they expected something in return." I unfolded the speech. The room became completely silent. I spent weeks writing this. I wanted it to be perfect. But tonight taught me something. I slowly folded the pages again. I'm not going to read it. Several guests looked surprised. I've spent 42 years telling students that character isn't measured on your best day. It's measured on your hardest one. I looked across the ballroom. Tonight became my hardest day, but thanks to all of you, it also became my proudest. I pointed toward the teachers, the bus drivers, the cafeteria staff, the custodians, the office assistants, the parents, the students. You were never my co-workers. You were my extended family. Many people were wiping away tears. I continued. If I've left anything behind, I hope it isn't another building. I hope it's the reminder that kindness outlives every promotion, every title, and every paycheck. When people remember us, they won't remember how important we believed we were. They'll remember how important we made them feel. The ballroom was silent. Then someone began clapping. A teacher. Another joined, then another. Within seconds, every single person in the room was standing, not politely, not because the program told them to, because they meant it. The applause lasted nearly 3 minutes. Brian stood frozen. Nobody looked at him anymore. The attention he'd tried to steal had returned to the person who earned it. The deputy gently touched his arm. "We need to go." Brian finally looked at me. The word sounded unfamiliar now. "I made a mistake," I answered quietly. "No. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. A mistake is taking the wrong exit. What you did tonight required planning." He lowered his eyes. There was nothing left to say. Deputies escorted Brian and Vanessa from the ballroom. The same doors they'd entered believing they controlled the evening. This time, they walked through them alone. 3 months later, the school district dedicated a new annual award. Not for academic achievement, not for fundraising, not for years of service, for compassion. The Harold Whitmore Compassion Award would be presented each year to the employee who showed extraordinary kindness to students and co-workers. When they asked if I wanted my photograph displayed beside it, I politely declined. Instead, I asked them to frame something else, the retirement speech, still stained with dried red wine. Visitors often ask why it was never replaced. The principal always gives the same answer, because those stains remind us that dignity isn't something another person can take away. Last spring, I visited the school one final time. A young teacher stopped me in the hallway. "I wasn't at your retirement gala. I've only heard the story." She smiled. "I just wanted you to know. We'll still teach your speech during staff orientation." I laughed softly, but I never gave it. She smiled back. "You didn't have to. The way you handled that night became the speech." I walked outside into the afternoon sunshine. For the first time in months, I realized something. My retirement hadn't ended my life's work. It had simply given my greatest lesson a much larger classroom.